Welcome to Garden Valley Church Podcasts. We are so looking forward to having you join us today.
Well, hi guys. Welcome to the Youth Culture Podcast. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Youth Culture Podcast. This is part 2 of dreams and passions and going after the things that God's placed inside of us. And so I'm very excited. I'm here with Emily Lowery, who just talked about an amazing conversation and talking about going after your dreams and your passions and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm very excited. I'm going to be kind of sharing a little bit of my story, and she's going to be emceeing this a little bit. So it's going to be a good conversation. Emily, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing good.
Good. We're filming mid-lunch. You hungry yet?
Yeah, we're going to have some pizza after. I can't wait.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, so obviously you grew up here in Garden Valley.
Yes.
You've told a little bit about your story. You are now in youth ministry, launching your own clothing brand. You have lots of things going on in your life. How is it that you are navigating really what to most people seems like 3 different lanes of vision and passion? Because you have the youth ministry, you have music, and you have a clothing line. How is it that those are all one for you?
Yeah. It's been a very interesting journey and process. I think to start, I need to go back 10 years.
Not surprising.
Yeah. So, man, it's been like 12, almost 13 years now, because Ruach is getting ready to be 3 years old on June 9th. And that's one piece. And then we have the youth ministry remix that is separate from that. And Ruach is both the clothing line and now the music as well. So it's kind of like taking this evolution where it's all kind of coming together. And what's amazing is Remix, being the youth ministry, has its own vision, its own dreams and passions. And so Ruach just kind of sits underneath of it with the youth band being Ruach and then also the clothing line being Ruach. And so for me, yes, there are 3 completely separate lanes, vision, but it all kind of fits under this compass of just bringing people in as a community. And I think for me, when I was 12 years old, I just turned 25.
On Sunday.
Yeah, on Sunday.
Literally 3 days ago.
A couple of days ago, yeah. But what's amazing is looking back on it, I actually see the thread of how it's all connected. And as we were talking about your podcast episode, this last one, talking about looking back and kind of seeing like where God was and how he was like moving things around to get you to where you are now and how there's been like such an evolution. I think for me, I always knew I was going to do music, clothing, and eventually work with youth. And so I feel like the last couple of years has kind of become this like full circle moment where I was in the youth group and I was involved in doing all that kind of stuff. Went away to Reading. Never thought I would ever be back in my home church, let alone working with the youth. Never thought I'd have a clothing line in Roseburg, Oregon. And I never thought that we'd be creating music. And now here we are with an album. And so for me, it really has just felt like a full circle kind of experience.
Now, you went down to Reading. You went to their school of ministry. Was that 2 or 3 years?
I was there for 3 years.
Okay. I thought it was 3 years. Mm-hmm. And you had a number of people because at that point, like your goal wasn't yes, you had youth ministry kind of in the background of something you wanted to do, but your goal was more launching that clothing line. You had a number of people that were telling you like, hey, Roseburg isn't the place to do this. You want to stay down in Reading or LA or San Diego or something like that, right? So how did you end up back in Roseburg at the end of all that?
It's so exciting. I remember we went on a missions trip when I came home to Los Angeles, and I went with Wendy. It was at the Dream Center. No, sorry, backtrack. It was before I went to Reading.
I was wait a minute. Before you went to Reading.
I had to think about it.
That was when you were an intern here as a youth.
I was interning. Yes. So we went to LA for that, and I fell in love with the city. I love the people there. I love the coffee. I love the different churches and the communities that I saw, even though right around the corner is Skid Row. I came home and was like, oh my gosh, Roseburg's like a mini LA. And I started talking to other people that were like, how could you ever think little old Roseburg is like the next LA or like the next Reading or like hub of creativity? And it's really kind of been cool to watch over the last year and a half or so, connecting with other people that are moving to Roseburg. There's people leaving other cities to come to Roseburg.
Yeah, it's been, obviously I have the experience in real estate. It's been a really crazy, weird adventure seeing from the time that I was in insurance, and we were seeing some people come up from California, nothing like now, to now where we're like COVID hit. Remote work is a thing. Like it is the thing that so many people do. So they can move to these smaller cities like Roseburg. And there's a lot of talk about how Roseburg is making that shift to being aesthetically and kind of feel more like how Bend, Oregon was, and that merge of LA, and all of those different kind of things that we're seeing more pubs pop up. We're seeing the aesthetic change. We're seeing how buildings are kind of shifting and getting remodeled and upgraded and all of these things, which is super exciting. So exciting. And you saw that, 7-ish, 8 years ago. I think it was probably 8 years ago that you guys were down in LA. So so that's exciting. So you were kind of at that point, were you thinking that you were going to end up in Roseburg, or was it just
not at all?
Okay.
I was like, I'm going to LA, but I did notice it was like, wow, this is like a kind of in a way LA, because there's such
an
a
emerging
homeless population.
Culture.
There's such a homeless population and drug using. I mean, it's just like crazy in Roseburg that we have all this stuff, yet at the same time there's so many different like avenues of like communities and churches and different things like doing stuff together. You're seeing a change with just the different markets, like the different businesses you're seeing are more kind of mom and pop now, and there's a lot of local businesses in Roseburg. And so for me, I still wasn't convinced. And when I was in my third year of ministry school, I interned at a church called The Stirring, which is basically my second home other than Garden Valley. And I had the privilege of serving with Mike Cruz, who was the creative director, youth director, and also creative like out in the community. And so he had his own clothing line called Alethea. And it was the first time I had ever seen like a pastor be in a church but have this entire community of culture that was outside of the church and was reaching people, and that was kind of bringing people into the church. And so for me, that really was the first time where I could physically see an example of that, and that dream of like, what could it be like to have a clothing line that was outside the church but also brought people into the church through conversations and community, etc. It was through Alethea. And so the way that I got back to Roseburg was when I went home after that summer in third year, I saw it. I like came home and I was like, this is the next LA. And my heart was like there. It was like, I need to move back to Roseburg. Like I need to come home. And like there was this thing in me, almost like you know, there's like the push or like the feeling of, oh, the Holy Spirit's leading and guiding me to go there, like you talked about. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that was the moment where I knew, like, I need to come back home. And so I went home for the summer, came back to Reading, said goodbye to the students, and let the pastors know, hey, I really feel the tug to come back home and, like, be with my family. And they were super supportive of it. And literally within 2-3 weeks, I was gone. And I was back here. And I interned here at the church for a couple of years, just doing some odds and ends, clean lots of toilets, that kind of fun
Interns
stuff.
Are fun.
Oh, yeah. Interning is so fun.
Two fellow interns.
Yeah, do it.
There's a lot of things that you do that you're like, oh, that's how that gets done in a church.
Yeah.
It's the interns.
The interns do it.
If you have a chance to intern, take it. Like there is an impartation that happens when you're interning that I haven't found another way to get it.
Yeah. I agree.
There's a season of learning that you get as an intern that just, it's an elevation above and beyond sitting in a pew on a Sunday morning or in a chair or, even if you're having regular meetings with a pastor that you just, you can't get. There's just this camaraderie and this partnership when you're interning under your pastors. That's just,
yeah.
I love it.
And with the young adults and youth, we're going to be actually doing some different like workshops and some summer internships. So if you're into that, stay tuned for that kind of fun stuff. But back to what you were talking about, I think like what tugged me and pulled me back was the leading of the Holy Spirit. I didn't have a clothing line, didn't do music, and was not the youth director when all that happened. So it was literally taking a step of faith, knowing that I was hearing God, trusting in that, and then the different experiences and things that I saw in Reading and the different things with the youth group, because I worked with the youth group as well with Mike Cruz, and but I knew like I needed to come home, and so that's how I got back here.
Okay, nice. So then you started back in Roseburg with a clean slate. You were probably 21, 22-ish, right? Okay. So from there, like, you have this vision, you know that you're supposed to be in Roseburg, and you have zero idea how you're actually getting the end result.
Zero idea.
So how is it that you really saw that dream start actually bubbling into where this is your passion and this is what you are spending your days doing?
Yeah.
Like, this is literally, like, this is your full-time gig. Like, you're doing the music, the leadership, the clothing line. Like,
yeah.
How is it that you got to that point where it shifted from dream to this is your passion?
Yeah. Man, if there's one thing that I took away from this last podcast with Emily that you need to listen to, it took the death of one dream for a new one to come up and for me to really discover what that dream and that passion was. I believe I had to go away from Reading, the Stirring, everything I knew for 3 years. Like, those were my people. That was my community. Like, that's who I did life with. And I felt like for a season, God actually isolated me. Even though I was back home and I had people, leaders that I knew, but it was like this time where God's like, okay, I'm going to mold and I'm going to shape Brandon. And this dream is going to be, it's going to come out through that. And so for me, it looked like, I started with a journal. I always tell people this. I started with a drawing journal. I would draw, come up with concepts, ideas. I have lots of stuff of different like designs and things that have never come out, never come to the surface, never will. And I have some pages that are literally like thousands of squiggles because that's how I started. That's how I got my start. Before it was ever like, okay, I'm going to actually design something or come up with a concept. And so for me, I would come home from youth group, be super exhausted, tired because it's, you know, just a long day. And I would grab a journal and I'd start just kind of coming up with concepts and ideas and stuff. Eventually it got to the point where Wendy was like, hey, the church youth group has an iPad that is used for music and that's it. Why don't you take that home? And so I started designing and coming up with things on an iPad, which was a whole nother level before Procreate. This was before symmetrical drawing and like all that kind of stuff. It was very detailed and finite and all that stuff. So I used the iPad, and I remember one night specifically, I have a journal page that actually just has the letter R, like so many times before I finally got the Ruach R, and it was, so there it is. Anyway, you see it there, but like there's the R. Anyway, so the logo itself, I custom made, and it's very basic and very simple, but it took a very long time for like those things to kind of like come together. So what I tell people is it's taking one step every single day towards that dream until you see it happen. So for me, there was a day where literally I went home from youth group, I went to sleep, and I woke up at 3 a.m. and I heard the Holy Spirit speak to me. He said, go grab the iPad. So I grabbed the iPad and I started kind of weaving and doing this, and before you know it, it was the outline of this like what looks like breath, like, and it was like these little tiny squiggles, and then it became okay. Then it was the head of a skull, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Whoa, this is weird, you know? Because I've always loved like rock and metalcore and all that kind of stuff and loved that scene. So of course it would make sense that that design would be kind of what I came up with. But I tell people all the time, that was the first time where I physically in my body felt like chills come off my spine because I was partnering with the Holy Spirit. Like I could tell that's what was happening. And so that's where it changed from being an idea to I'm actually crafting something with the Holy Spirit. I'm actually crafting a dream. And then the Ruach logo just came to be. Like it literally was just like I was super meticulous. And anyways, by the time it was like 4 hours, whatever it was 4 hours it took. So 7 in the morning, I woke up, had no sleep. I was supposed to take my siblings to school. I had to go to work, and I was just like, I went through that day just being like, oh my God, what is this? Like, what just happened? And so for me, that was the start of Ruach and the start of seeing that come to being what it is today.
And see, it's crazy. Like you talk about, you took some very practical steps.
I did.
To kind of go through and see and explore this. Mine was very kind of just jump off the deep end. Pastor Matt Brady and Pastor Sean Konopowski brought me in. Their social media director had stepped out and was going into a different phase of their life. And they were like, hey, you're on social media. Can you do this? And I was like, I can do it interim. Like, I'll do it interim.
I'll do it for you.
And it just never ended. The interim was not interim. And I don't know if they knew that at the time. I didn't either. But it literally, like, it was just... But that's how God operates in my life. It's very different for each person. God kind of has to just drop things on me, so I can't have these grandiose, detailed plans around it, because that's how my brain works. Is I would start planning out all the detail pieces. That's not how your mind works, and I know that because I know you.
But I did have to make a business plan. I did have to have vision plan. I had to have all of that.
So how was it for you? Because you're very much, your personality and how you do life is you are a vision caster, which makes you an amazing youth director. And you're amazing at motivating people to do things. However, administratively is something we struggle
at it. Like, suck at it.
So how was it like for you realizing that, okay, your dream and passion isn't always something that you're going to be great at with all of the details of it? Like, what was it like realizing, oh shoot, this isn't necessarily going to be like 100% in my groove of gifting?
Yeah. So to backtrack, I had to start doing my own social media for the ministry. And then I also was creating that for Ruach once this design had kind of taken form. So with that, I had to learn hashtags. I had to learn marketing. I had to learn all of that was kind of a part of that. So I took all these skills I learned in business and I was like, okay, I'm a self-made entrepreneur. I didn't work a 9-to-5 for another company or anything like that other than interning here at the church and getting that kind of experience. So with that, I was taking those skills and bringing that to the ministry. And what I felt like God showed me is he was like, Brandon, if I can teach you how to do this in business and I can teach you how to do this with building this clothing line and having this idea, you're going to be able to take the same template, because I did graphic design. So I was like, oh, it's a template. I can take the template and apply this and change things to how it needs to be for the youth ministry. And that's where we're at with creating vision for Remix and the exciting remodel that we're thinking about in the future and different changes and making it feel more like home and all that kind of stuff. All of that came from me also having a vision for Ruach. And so everything is kind of like this intertwined, I call it a marriage. I felt like the Holy Spirit said, Brandon, I'm going to teach you how to marry the two. Ministry and business and entrepreneurship and clothing and bring it all together. And so for me, yes, some days I'm very like sporadic and sometimes borderline schizophrenic with my thinking and ideas and thoughts and let's go do it. But I have an amazing team that's helped me to put the pieces together to make things happen. Emily has helped me schedule everything for the podcasting, making that happen. I've had Wendy, who's helped me plan different events and make things happen. Carl, who is teaching me with like mentorship and discipleship. Brian, who's been just an amazing advisor with making different decisions. Having people like Sean and Pastor Craig to help me lead the ministry and various things together. And really, it's been an amazing team effort. It's not just Brandon doing it. I think one of the biggest things I've learned over the last few years is learning to work in teams is where it's at.
Yeah, and Garden Valley's big on teams. We're big on a team structure and making sure that no one is doing this run alone.
Absolutely.
Obviously, in my situation, I'm married. We're running this race together. That's my team, is my husband and my kids.
Yeah.
If you guys follow me on social media or follow my business, like I include my kids in as the business team. There are interns. Not really, because they're too little really to do much of anything that we would have an intern do. So we still do all of it. But what is it like for you, kind of shifting the perspective for you from really being an intern, because you basically went from being an intern to directing an entire team that isn't, it's not a small team. Your team is bigger than my team. I have 2 people on my team, one of which is in the room with us, our amazing film editor and videographer somewhere that I can't see, Sean Beer.
Who will be on his own podcast soon.
Yes. And then and then I have my husband, which obviously that makes it easy because it's my husband. You guys
do life together.
Yes, we do life together. But you have, yes, that is a benefit I have. But like you don't have a life partner right now. You don't have a spouse, but you do have a large team underneath you of people that it's an interesting dynamic. Like some of the people that are underneath you as youth director were your youth directors.
Or have more experience and should be running the show.
Or have significantly more experience. I don't know that should is the best way to say that. They could be.
That's it. They could be. I know.
But like, what is that like for you? Because you have this dream, this passion, you have a very clear vision. And then you're managing and working with people that, in theory, if it was just all on paper, they would be the ones in the position that you're in. How do you navigate that as a leader?
That's a great question. And I think one of the reasons I'm most excited to share about this podcast is because everything is done in teams. But it also means that if we think of our life like a tapestry, every single person has a thread that they bring to that. If you think of a table that has food on it, every single person brings something to that table. So it would be very selfish of me as a leader to go, this is the ministry, and this is what it's going to look like, and this is what it's going to feel like. And before you know it, you have religion. But what breaks the box of religion is relationship. And so I'm very close with each of the team members. I'm asking for their feedback, their advice on things, because I value that. And as a young leader, they have so much experience in things that I don't. I mean, we've had constant conversations about youth and how to navigate different things and your different ideas on how we could improve the ministry as well. And I just think as a young leader, I'm learning the value of having friendship with your team members and beginning to work together so that it's a team effort, not one person doing everything that has volunteers or people on the side over here, but really finding a place where they fit with their calling and their purpose that God has given them and designed them for a season or for where they're at currently, and fitting them into that, where they're going to run in their lane and thrive. And so
fantastic. So they can kind of walk out their own dreams and visions and passions while still being able to work within the dreams and passions that you have in this particular case with the youth ministry or with the music. Because you had an album come out, you had youth that were giving tremendous input on that.
Their project. I mean.
Yeah, you just happen to be the one managing it to a certain degree and kind of facilitating all the logistics.
Which is very much admin that I didn't think I was going to be able to do.
Yes. So you obviously, like, you're 6-7 years younger than me. Mm-hmm. So to a certain degree, I think you fall into a different generational structure than I do. But what is it like seeing kind of your generation having a very large shift from, it used to be that you would move away from your hometown and go and wherever it is that you moved was really where you were casting your vision, and that's where you found your passion. But we've been seeing a lot of people where, for one reason or another, they're coming back home.
Yeah.
And that's where they're really starting to find that fire in them. What is that like, watching your fellow interns from Bethel really have that happen? Because there's been a number of people that I've interacted with that for one reason or another were up in Roseburg that then were like, you know what? No, I really feel the calling to be home. I need to be home. What is it like in this season for you?
I think what's amazing is Garden Valley excels at family and shows like this is what healthy family looks like. Like this is what a healthy church. And we're not perfect. We're people, you know, like we work together, but we have things in life that we don't agree on, and that's totally okay. And I think the beauty of Garden Valley, like the way that the church reflects that, is to be home. And so I think a lot of people, specifically within this community, the reason that people are wanting to go back home and be tugged to come back home, people that went through the school of ministry that want to come back home, is because God is all about family. And he's all about building people that are into wanting to do life together, because we're never supposed to do life alone. Like, could you imagine being a teenager and you're off up in Portland, Oregon by yourself with no family? Sure, you could make experiences and find friends and all this kind of stuff, or maybe it's a very toxic environment. But the call to come back home is, I think that's one of the most powerful things that God does, is he places us in family.
And I think it's an important distinction. I've obviously worked with homeless youth. And some of them had very supportive families that for one reason or another, because the shelter I was in, it was at risk, runaway, or homeless. And at risk is a very broad term if you are familiar with the term at risk when it comes to state or federal guidelines. So some of them had stable family homes, but for whatever reason, they didn't feel like they were supposed to be there, and they needed a safe place to come. So they came to Casa. But a large majority of them it was a very toxic home life. Like there was, like, the only reason the Department of Human Services and Child Welfare was not involved is because they were at Casa in a safe location. So I want to make a clear distinction. Like, there is a difference in home in the traditional two parents and the kids and a functioning family unit as a biological family unit. And home as in, this is where your heart is at, and this is where you were raised, and this is your family. Which is why, like, there's a number of people, as incredible as my family unit has been, and my parents obviously are here. My mom's on staff here. My dad volunteers because he's now retired, and he'll be on another podcast on here with Brandon. But and my brother's in ministry in another church. Like, my family's amazing. I love them. I do life with them. Like, that is part of who I am. But I also have a number of people that are not blood related. Ironically, actually, now that I say that, my parents included because I'm adopted. But that are not blood or legally related.
Right.
That they're my home.
Yeah. Right.
And we're seeing that, where we're really seeing a shift. Where a lot of people they're coming back to their roots, to their home. They're not branching out like it was 15 years ago, when my friends were graduating and finishing school, and we were deciding, hey, what are we all going to do? Where are we going? And my generation, especially and older, very much like there's not as many people that are living in their rooted place where this is where they grew.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas you have that benefit, like you as a person do, and your generation seems to, and God's doing a very interesting shift in where he's building people's passions.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun thing to watch get walked out for sure, and watch get walked out for you because I'm here to see it.
Yeah, so. that too.
A little biased, but
it's fun because, like, in our family and our family dynamic, we also have adopted, like, spiritual, sisters and brothers and etc. And it just seems like as time goes on and as our family is like building and building and building, it's been this really interesting dynamic to see like the different passions and dreams that each of them have. Mm-hmm. And what's been super cool is how supportive they've been of my own dreams and also how I can support their dreams and etc. And so it just feels like it's this like ecosystem.
Moving, yes.
Yeah. And with the ministry, Garden Valley Church has been more than supportive when it comes to like, you know, Brandon has a dream for this and like, how can we come alongside and partner with that? And so I'm super thankful and super grateful that, you know, Pastor Craig and Sean and Nancy, our whole executive team, like that they would allow me to bring in like, this is the dream that God has placed in me to bring to the youth and say, you can actually just have this in your youth room. And like, we want to support that. And like, we want to be a part of that.
Yes. And that's been historically what happens with the youth group. It's crazy insane. Like we have a pie auction. You hit record numbers this last in 2021, because I can't remember when this episode will air.
Yeah.
On what was brought in. Like it was crazy insane.
It's humbling.
So you have a lot of support. Garden Valley is amazing. Like there are constant conversations that the trajectory is, okay, this is so-and-so's dream and passion. How can we partner with them to elevate this to a new level and get them where they're wanting to go? And it's a very incredible environment to be in. And
Really is.
I didn't grow up in Garden Valley. I grew up in another church, but it's been a privilege to do adulthood in this church. I can only imagine how amazing it had to have been to grow up knowing that as much as someone may stumble or fall or do something ridiculous, there is always that, okay, you're invested in this, we're invested in this. How do we get you there?
Right. Yeah, the legacy of Garden Valley. We should do a whole episode on the legacy of Garden Valley. It's like, man, there's so much here. But I think too that, I mean, I might cry. Anyway, I cried that Sunday that we released an album. And the reason for that, one, I mean, the vision behind that was we wanted to
literally were having it birthed.
Like we birthed it at Garden Valley. Yeah, at Garden Valley. We did a listening party afterwards. We talked about the album for the service. We got to do the music for worship. Like it was the whole service. But one of the most amazing things about that was that so many teenagers were involved in that and families were involved in that. And the birth of that kind of coming to fruition as being a young kid and dreaming about what's it going to be like one day to have a band. But the God dream of that being like, no, I want to actually birth that here and cultivate that vision here and cultivate that environment here and bringing in families and bringing in youth. And now being a youth director, which by the way, never thought that was going to happen, but everyone around me is like, Brandon, you're going to lead the youth. And like I had prophetic words about leading the youth. And like, so,
and it was conversations while you were still a youth that like we could see things bubbling in you that meant that at some point we had a feeling you would be in some kind of leadership role. Obviously, I don't know that any of us anticipated, because you were going to Reading. Like, I don't know that any of us anticipated that you were going to land here and be taking the youth ministry over and carrying on Wendy's legacy from that. But
because Wendy's my hero, man.
Yes.
Just like Emily's one of my heroes.
We keep referencing Wendy Konopowski. She was actually going to do this particular episode, but she has family things that have come up that we wanted to make sure that she was able to pour her full focus on. But Wendy is amazing. She was my maid of honor, so I'm definitely biased. But she has mentored both Brandon and I over the years, and was definitely instrumental in helping Brandon very seamlessly make this shift from just someone who was volunteering on the youth team to stepping into a leadership role to fully taking over the youth director position. And still being willing to be there to support him and be a sounding board. And I'm sure so many more times than what any of us realize.
And she still is, man. I still call her and I'm like, can we get coffee? I need to run some things by you. Like, I need help.
Yes.
But Wendy still is very much, a part of Remix in the sense that her legacy carries on.
Oh yeah, her
Not
legacy.
that she's dead.
Yes,
I mean, we're not
her
getting
legacy
that.
and
Yeah.
what she poured into youth ministry.
Yeah.
She has one of her own kids that are in the youth group now.
Yeah.
That 6th grade, I think, something like that, 7th, 6th, 7th, somewhere in there, where I'm sure it has to be interesting for her to shift from being the youth director to just being a youth parent.
Yeah.
And knowing that one of her youth is now in the position of youth director has to be almost surreal. Like, it's surreal for me that this is the position you're in.
The texts that I get from her sometimes. I mean, I love sending memes and like that's a whole thing. But anyways, with Wendy, like I'll never forget that Sunday when she texts me and she's like, I was just crying watching you be up there and like in the lane that you're supposed to be in. And she's like, there's nothing like that. There's no emotion that can describe how I feel about that, basically. And we cried together when it was that Sunday where the baton was passed off because
I think everybody cried.
Yeah.
You were not alone in that.
It is surreal. I have high hopes and dreams and expectations for where the youth ministry is headed in the future. What could it look like for other churches to maybe have campuses that are youth involved, that the kids are so connected and they're a part of the church. It's not just they're over here in the back corner, but like they really are an extension of the church. And when we put the music out, the album, that was really the first stepping stone with, where I feel like the youth ministry is headed. Not that we're leaving, but it would be amazing to take a team to install that heart and install the DNA of Remix into other churches and see other youth groups come alive and be inspired. And so I'm just very excited. It's amazing also to see other youth pastors come together and just want to spend time together and like pick each other's brains. Like I love being around, Ricky Logston and Brian Vaughn and some of the others and just like picking brains.
And Douglas County is unique that way. I don't know that there's many other areas. Douglas County, both from a senior pastor leadership position, we have B1 Umpqua, the pastors monthly in the Douglas County area get together and go through and they'll brainstorm things. They're friends. Like they're very much their friends. And it's nice as a marketing director to know that, hey, like I also have, 30 other pastors that I can call and bounce something off of if one of ours is not available. But I also have 30 other churches that I can go through and toss when we're doing a big conference, hand it over to them and say, hey, like this is what we're doing. I want to empower you guys to come. How can I help with your marketing on this? Right. But the youth leaders have it. Like the youth leaders have, I don't know if it's still called B1 Umpqua 2.0.
DCEF 2.0.
That's what it was, DCEF 2.0, the original iteration of B1 Umpqua. But yeah, the youth leaders also from the churches get together and meet. And I think for our area, I'm not seeing as much burnout as what a lot of churches do in youth leaders. I think the average time span that youth leaders last is about 5 years. I can't blame them. Mm-hmm. I know what youth leaders go through. I know the times where I was really feeling stretched thin working with youth. I can only imagine that it has to have gotten even harder. So having that support system and knowing that you have people that you can call and get coffee with or go to a movie with or just shoot the breeze with about something pointless just to get your mind off of the chaos that may be going on.
Not do life alone.
Yes, and not do life alone. Like especially in a season right now, you're single, you're not dating someone, you're not married, and you need those partners that get what you're going through as a youth pastor. Totally. And there's some things that only youth pastors can understand.
I've called Eric Lopez, one of my buddies from Yakima, Washington. He's been a mentor to me for years, but I call him every week. We talk about stuff every week. My buddy Sam, he's on his way. He'll be here for the podcast. You'll be seeing him soon. But...
They'll have already seen him by this episode.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yes.
Perfect. But Sam will...
Clearly, we're recording them out of sequence.
Yeah, anyway, all that to say, Sam will be here, and we've been friends for over 10 years, and so it's just very exciting to have people in your corner, even from afar, that you can talk with and do life with. So
yes.
It's awesome.
Fantastic.
To kind of end off this episode in the podcast, I just want to really encourage you that it may take 10 years or more for something to come to life, but it will. And the promise is that God always fulfills what he promises. And so if you take those baby steps and you begin to put one step, one after another, eventually that dream is going to come to life. That dream is going to blossom. And it's okay to go through an evolution and to have changes. I mean, gosh, the new Ruach logo that we just did 6 months ago that is different and new, it took a whole different aesthetic change. It went from kind of this basic simple look to a very custom one-of-one font made by a designer, packaged, being something brand new. And so it's okay to go through an evolution. It's okay to see things change over time. And I just want to encourage you that if you're watching this video and you say to yourself, Brandon, there are dreams within me that have been dead for a long time. Or maybe I've allowed bitterness or hopelessness to take over and those dreams are dormant. I just want to speak to that and say to you that your dreams will live again.
And rest easy in the reality of they will be there.
Yeah.
They may not be the same iteration that at 14 you were thinking they would be.
Sure.
But those dreams will come to pass. My life looks dramatically different than I imagined it would at 31.
Right.
But the core things that I dreamed about and I prayed into and I wanted, those are there.
Wow.
The aesthetic looks different.
On.
So rest easy in the fact that God has you. The stress of worrying about the details of what it will look like and how it will come to be. It's really easy to get wrapped up in that. But know that God has this. He's advocating for you, and that's the only advocate that you need is God. He will guide you through the steps in which you need to take to reach the end result of seeing that dream come to fruition. And don't be surprised if it's very different from what you anticipated.
Absolutely.
That's half of the journey. It's half of the fun.
Love that. So with that, we're going to end the episode. Thank you so much for tuning into the Youth Podcast and Youth Culture Podcast. And we will see you guys in another video.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in checking out more of our podcasts as they come available, please download our app in your device's app store or check us out on your podcast platform at Garden Valley Church. We look forward to seeing you next time.